are now listening to the Insight BBL Show with your hosts, Brain and Horse.
Yes, we're back for another episode. We've got the fireworks in the background for the horse. And of course, it is very fitting that the fireworks are here for Horse's team, the Melbourne Renegades, as we preview them. How are you, mate? You excited to talk about your Gades?
Yeah, I hope they're better than last year. But we've got some key players that have been signed by the Renegades. But also, the Renegades have lost over half their squad. So we're going to go through their team today. We're going to pick out some superstars, some people to fade, some cheap ones, and a little bit more.
Tons coming. I'm excited about this one. This could go a little bit over time because there's a bit to talk about with the Renegades having the round one double game week, and it's the first team that we've previewed to have the round one double game week. So, forgive us if we talk a little bit more than we normally would on these team previews. But if you want to not really worry about the talking and you want to read and you want to get exclusive access to our Insight Patreon, this is how you do it.
Want to take your Supercoach game to the next level? Insight Fantasy Sports are bringing you exclusive content all year round, such as weekly expert Q&As, team, trade, and captaincy advice, statistical deep dives, priority podcast questions, and tons more. So what are you waiting for? Get full access to the experts. Go to patreon.com/Insight Fantasy Sports and subscribe to Insight Unlimited today.
Yes, you can. All right, let's rip into this, mate. The ins and outs. I'll tell you what, we're going to be here for a while because there's a bit of movement for the Gades, like you mentioned.
There's lots.
Who's coming in?
So I've got Josh Brown from the Brisbane Heat coming into this squad. Dare say he'll be opening. Jacob Bethel, the Pom, who will miss round one. He's been picked as part of the ODI squad for England. Laurie Evans from the Perth Scorchers comes across to the Gades this year, an underrated signing for them. Tim Seifert, we will touch on him a bit later. And your man, Gurinder Sandhu, from the Thunder comes across to the Renegades.
Why is he my man for? Is that because I bought him last year?
You loved him last year.
I didn't really. I mean, I bought him and probably shouldn't have.
So your man.
Yeah, there's that. Yep, that's fair. Okay, I can cop that. The outs for the Renegades are what the talking point is, because I think we spoke off air horse about the Gades and about how many players they're losing, and you could put together 2/3 of an all-star squad with these guys that they're missing. Sean Marsh retired, Aaron Finch retired, Nick Maddinson to the Thunder. Quinton de Kock, obviously, is not coming back this year. Didn't really look like he enjoyed his time over here last year anyway, so probably good for the Gades. Joe Clark, I think they'll miss Joe Clark. There was rumour that maybe they would get an exemption and they would be able to bring Joe Clark back to replace Bethel round one. Majib Ur-Rahman was a big part of what they were doing last year before he went off to international duties, and Akil Hussain has been signed by the Sydney Sixers. Mate, some serious losses there.
Akil Hussain is a massive loss for the Renegades. I feel like he'll be really good up there on a spinning wicket in the Sydney.
And they have struggled over the years. I know Marvel Stadium does turn and does have a bit of movement. It's not an easy pitch to bat on by any means. So it's just unfortunate that Akil Hussain missed the majority of the tournament last year. I think he only played the last 2 rounds and one of those games was washed out. So, unfortunate for him, but the Sixers have everything to gain in bringing him across this year. So plenty of excitement over in Sydney, I'm sure. Mate, predicted 11. How do you see these guys rolling out to start?
Yeah, we see Josh Brown at number 1 there. We saw how quickly he can hit 100 last year. Him and Tim Seifert from New Zealand, go and watch his highlights package. He can hit 360 degrees of the wicket and is a very clean striker of the ball. Speaking of clean strikers of the ball, Jake Fraser-McGurk hasn't been in good form lately, but is perhaps one of the biggest hitters that we have in the game at the moment. Laurie Evans at 4. They've got some real nice batting talent at the top here, Nath. Mackenzie Harvey, we've just seen made a ton in a one-dayer against Victoria for South Australia at 5. Jono Wells at 6. Will Sutherland at 7. Tommy Rogers at 8. Gurinder Sandhu at 9. Zampa and Richardson 10 and 11 respectively. And as we said earlier, Jacob Bethel has been picked as part of the England ODI squad. He will return for round 2.
Lots of talking points, mate. Lots to talk about here. Obviously, Bethel would have probably slotted into that 4-5 slot. Batsman bowler, good dual position player, probably a guy that people would have considered to lock into their teams early on, but he will miss round 1. And that's tough because I think the one thing to talk about with the Gades as well is that you don't really want to load up on too many of these guys because they do have that round 3 bye. How many players would you look at to start with from the Gades?
I've got two. I think you can probably go with three, but you've got to have a plan to get off them unless you're planning on using them as loop players for their buy.
I think for the most part, there's not really other players you're going to want to trade out. I mean, I'm looking at my squad, and a lot of the squad is set up for the first 4 rounds. Like obviously Stars have 2 doubles, Strikers have 2 doubles, Perth have a double in round 2, Brisbane Heat have a double, Sydney Sixers have a double. I don't really have any Hobart Hurricanes or any Thunder players unless they're loops. So like I've set the majority of my team up to get me through the first 4 rounds. So my plan, I think I'm going to go with 4 Renegades personally, but my plan is to get pretty much at least 2 or 3 of them out come that round 3, or use them as loops, which is another option as well. So, mate, let's kick off guns. There's one that stands out, and that's Tim Seifert. You mentioned plays 360 degrees, good bat. He will wicket keep, is my opinion, for the Renegades. I think he's a great option. The only problem becomes the price when then you've got to fit in a Maxwell, a Curran, a Webster, and all of these other guys. You're starting to run out of cash, and he starts to become the first casualty of your team if you're trying to fit in Matt Short.
Unfortunately so, yeah.
Good player, though. So if you don't plan on running Matt Short round 1, I would probably make sure I had Seifert on the double in your team. Value-wise, though, I'll tell you what, this is probably the team to find the value. A lot of underpriced guns, and I think there's 3 that really stand out for me, and they're all bowlers. Tom Rogers, Kane Richardson, and Adam Zampa are severely undervalued, in my opinion. I think we look at Tom Rogers to start. 117K is the most expensive of the lot of them. But I think when we think back 2 years ago to how good Tom Rogers was, he does death bowling. He can also hold a stick too. I think he'll bat 8 for the Renegades. He can hold a stick. Last year, he had an average of 39.8, but the 2 seasons before that, he went 59.6 and 56.2. So let's just assume that he goes back to his normal role or his normal average across those games. We're looking at 20 points of value, which is potentially about, 70 or 80K? 70K?
Yep.
You're looking at a 180K player you can get for 117K to start.
Really like that.
Who else, mate? Adam Zampa. Thoughts?
World-class leg spinner. On a marble deck that's hard to bat on. I think at 80K, it's too hard to refuse, isn't it?
Yeah, I think also we spoke about it on the first episode, Horse, as well. We talked about the fact that the international workload for Zampa over those past 2 seasons in the lead up to BBL has been massive, to a point where he had to have a day of rest and miss a game for the Gades last year because he was that burnt out and buggered from the World Cup. Coming in fresh, I'm not worried about that anymore. Zamps looks after his body. I think that he's going to come back into some of his best form. And at 80K, you're practically getting a cheapie and a guy that can produce probably 150K numbers for you.
100%. Yep.
And Kane Richo, mate, is he in your team at the moment?
He is. Death bowler, can bowl really well. He's got a really nice change of pace as well. Not really known for holding the stick, but in the field as well has got a rocket arm, and at 97K, severely underpriced. Again, he's been a 50, 55 scorer average in the past in BBL as well.
Yeah, so many guys at value, isn't it? Like, we talked about 20 points undervalued for Rogers and Zampa. We go back again to last year, 33 average for Richardson last year across 7 games. And the 3 seasons before that was 46, 65, 48. And then the 3 years before that, 56, 74, 67. So this is his lowest year by a country mile in the last 7 seasons. So
we both expect him to bounce back.
Big time. And I don't expect him to reach the heights of the 65 average, but I do expect him to be pushing that 50 mark. So, again, we're looking at 17 points of value right there, which is a guy that you want in your team. So, yeah, very happy to lock in Kane Richo. I guess the question becomes, there's all 3 of these guys who are all genuine options in Rogers, Zampa, and Richo. If you had to pick 2 of the 3, is it the 2 cheapest?
For me, it probably is. Yes.
I love the idea of Rogers as a pod, personally. To a point where I've toyed with him in and out of my team to see if I can make it work. And it does become quite tight if you want to get Short and Maxwell in. That extra 20K makes a really big difference at the end of the day between Rogers and Richardson. But if you can make that work, I'd probably lean towards Rogers, who could potentially get you some runs at the back end of the innings as well. Maybe that's the kicker.
If you were to have to make a choice between Sab and Tom Rogers, which way would you go?
Sab. I don't care about the double. And also, Sean Abbott has a double in round 3 anyway. So it's just like a delayed pick. We've talked about Sean Abbott and Jai Richardson being probably 2 of the best value picks to start the season. I'm not changing my opinion on that. I think also with Tom Curran leaving the Sixers, Sean Abbott is primed to go large this year.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
What about the cheapies, mate? This guy was absolutely clinical yesterday.
He was unreal. And for those of you that follow the Supercoach horse on Twitter, you would have seen that I was pretty impressed with Mackenzie Harvey. He was striking them to all parts of the ground. Really nice score of the wicket and made 134 of 110 against the Vicks. Just looked a class above, really. I know the Vicks didn't have a world-class bowling attack. They did have Peter Siddle, who he was dispatching to all parts as well. But at 58K for someone that's in this kind of form, if he's playing, he's at least on my bench as a loop option, especially on the double.
Yeah. I think, as a loop, definitely. They play the second game of the week, don't they? So you can use him as a loop for sure if you don't plan on looping a Perth Scorchers player. My only concern with Mackenzie Harvey is the fact that he's probably going to bat 5. Like if he bats in the top 4, I'm picking him 100%. If he's batting at 5, I don't know whether I can. I'd probably prefer to take a free swing at a like I mentioned in a previous episode at Maddinson, who's at the same price but could bat 3 for the Thunder. That's probably where my preference lies. But Mackenzie, you can't really go wrong with a 58K player. It's kind of like you're getting a free swing, and if it doesn't come off, so be it. Mackenzie Harvey likely drops out of this team anyway when Bethel comes back in round 2. So you just use him as a loop if it doesn't come off.
Yep.
Who are we fading, mate? There's a bit of contention about this one.
Yeah. Look, we've both spoken about this off air. And the first player that we're going to bring up is Will Sutherland. He's at 132K. And for those of you that remember, he was nearly north of 200K a couple of years ago. Didn't really bowl that much last year, but for the last 18 months, he's been struggling with injury to the point where he hasn't been bowling himself. Fresh injury concerns with Will Sutherland as well. He may not bowl and be a bat only. And at 132K, for someone that's a bat only who'll bat at 7, doesn't really tickle my buttons at all.
Nah, this is definitely all dependent on the injury news that we get over the next 5 weeks leading into round 1. And I think if we come into round 1 and he hasn't bowled up until then, and there's some concerns that he might not bowl, even last year when he took over the captaincy, we were trying to work out why isn't he bowling himself? What's going on? And then we find out later on that he actually was working his way through stress fractures in his back. And it is something that has been bothering him over the last 18 months. That then provides more concern for me than anything. And now this new fresh side strain that he's just had in the game last week, that's for Victoria, I should mention, in the Sheffield Shield. That's just, way too many red flags for me as a guy who's batting 7. Not for me if he's not bowling. Another guy that is 41% owned at the moment is Jake Fraser-McGurk, who is also on the fade list for us. And I think we've got to look back to his recent form is just horrendous. He just can't hit one off the square, unfortunately. But look, we know that it only takes one knock to get back into form. And I think if we start to see that in the lead up, he could be a guy that we look at. But in saying that, at the moment, based on what I'm seeing, I'm just not really liking what I'm seeing from Jake Fraser-McGurk. I would much probably prefer Josh Brown as a bit more of a swing and a miss than Jake Fraser-McGurk and save 10K, 15K.
Yeah, we've seen really, really struggled with the bat recently. With bowlers, you get 24 balls to make an impact. You get a point for a dot ball. You get however many runs or points for a wicket. You get your economy rate. With the way that he's batting at the moment, he's not scoring points at all for you. And 128K, there is much better value elsewhere.
I think potentially the way that you look at it would be, I think Josh Brown and Jake Fraser-McGurk are very similar players. I know Jake Fraser-McGurk is a more talented player, but in saying that, we saw what Josh Brown could do last year. Like, you only need one knock like that, and he's set up your season essentially. So let's just hope he can find one of those knocks in the first 2 games for the Gades, and he gets you off to a flyer.
Yep.
So whilst there is plenty of value across the board, we're kind of lacking guns at the Gades. We lost a lot of these guns from last year, Horse. And how do you see your Renegades going this year?
Middle of the road again. I don't think they'll be at the top with the Sixers and the Perths of the world. But, yeah, I don't see them winning it, but they'll be competitive.
Yeah, competitive enough. I think we initially thought they were going to win it all last year, and they definitely fell much short of expectation. But yeah, I think you're right. I agree with you. I think middle of the road this year for the Gades, but plenty of Supercoach value there if they can come off in round one. Just remember, you're going to have to get off a couple of these guys at least coming into their round 3 bye, so you don't get caught short there cash gen wise. But obviously things can change. We'll keep an eye out on the Will Sutherland injury in the news in the lead up. We'll post everything in our Patreon, keeping everybody up to date on what's happening there. But mate, that just about wraps us up for the Gays, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Nice and quick, straight to the point. It's what we're doing for all 8 teams.
That's it. So guys, hit that subscribe, like, follow, review, do all those things if you want to support the show. We would really appreciate that. Become a Patreon member if you want to as well, to get all the exclusive access to us and our Q&As and extra content we'll be putting on there and not putting on YouTube. That's coming your way as well. But we've got 4 more teams coming up as well. So we'll keep smashing those out over the next week or two. Then after that, once we've done the team previews, we're doing positional deep dives, aren't we?
Yeah, can't wait for that.
Plenty more news, I'm sure, in our back pocket come then. But guys, that will do us. Thanks for watching. Hit the sub button, and we'll see you for next episode. Catch you later.
See ya.